The United States is very proud that we had a long overdue meeting here of the UN Security Council today, and we are equally proud to stand with the Venezuelan people as they protest and restore democracy in their nation. Former President Maduro's socialist experiment has ruined a once proud nation, as I said earlier, and we stand with the Venezuelan people to restore democracy and return that country to its rightful condition. We've got a whole nation starving, massive malnutrition, refugees fleeing. This is an international crisis, to be sure. And nations like Cuba and Russia and China have shamefully cast their lot in support of the former president. They don't have the best interests of the Venezuelan people at heart. We hope that every nation will join us in recognizing interim President Juan Guaido. And we hope, too, that each of those nations will ensure that they disconnect their financial systems from the Maduro regime and allow the assets that belong to the Venezuelan people to go to the rightful governors of that state. And we hope, too, that this peaceful transition can continue. We must stand for the rule of law and support the leader who the Venezuelan people have affirmed through their constitution as the interim president of their country. Happy to take a couple questions.
Reuters, Michelle Nichols.
Hi. Thank you.
Hi.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Michelle Nichols from Reuters. A couple of questions. First of all, in there, the Russian ambassador had a very direct question for you about the U.S. taking military action. If you'd like to answer that here, feel free. What economic measures does the U.S. plan to impose on Venezuela? And do you think the Venezuelan opposition should assume the UN seat here? And does the U.S. plan to draft a General Assembly resolution to make that happen?
Michelle, let me take two of those three questions. First, this is the first step of what we hope will be real progress here at the United Nations. We think every member of the United Nations ought to join in support of the Venezuelan people, so we will continue to work to get more and more support. We're already a great deal along the way, and we do think that there will be appropriate resolutions when the time is right, and we'll certainly support those. They won't come just from us. They'll come from other nations who care deeply about the Venezuelan people as well. The other two questions involve what the United States will do next. I'm not going to speculate or hypothesize. I know only this. We're determined to support the Venezuelan people so that they can ultimately have the democratic institutions they deserve, and they can return this once vibrant, wealthy, wonderful nation to its rightful place.
Mr. Secretary, Voice of America, Celia Mendoza.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, Secretary. So what exactly are you prepared to do for the Venezuelan people? You had announced the $20 million in humanitarian aid. And also today you said something in your speech. It is time for every nation to pick its side. Will the U.S. consider secondary sanctions against countries who recognize the Maduro regime, like Washington did in Iran?
So the United States has already done a great deal for the Venezuelan people. We will continue to do that. You mentioned the initial monies, $20 million. To ensure that food and medicine and we can get some level of order to begin to be restored. There'll be much more to do. We'll call upon other nations. We will join with them to create development and humanitarian assistance projects that actually deliver for the Venezuelan people. Those are all part of what will come when we get the democratic changes that we're working towards achieving. You had a second question too?
Secondary sanctions,
yeah,
possibly.
I'm not going to speculate on what other processes the United States might undertake, but know that we think now that the National Assembly is the rightful governing body. They've chosen interim President Juan Guaido to represent them, and so we think that the resources that belong to the Venezuelan people ought to go to the leaders that they have, under their constitution, duly elected.
as you could tell by the opening today, well, our primary concern is sanctions and imperialism, colonialism, and the sanctioning of black people and indigenous people all across the globe. That was, well, first of all, let me introduce my guest, because I have with me, as always, very dynamic guests. And one of the premier organizations when it comes to global human rights is the December 12th movement. And I have with me today Iman and Roger Wareham, who has been with me a bunch of times. Iman has been with me a couple of times. But we're going to talk about Venezuela. We're going to talk about sanctions. We're going to talk about Zimbabwe. We're going to talk about what the ability for the United States of America to literally take the food out of the mouths of countries that they want to colonize and just hoard up all their resources, what the effect is, and hopefully what some of the solutions are, or at least combat strategies. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Iman and Roger. Iman, you guys can pick somebody who could start off. You were at the UN yesterday at a rally.
We were both at the UN, and since I have a raspy throat, I'm going to defer to youth
Excellent,
and beauty.
excellent.
Okay. So what's happening in Venezuela is obviously a coup. That's what's going on. The American government wants to come in and, place themselves in a position where they can be in control of the resources that Venezuela has, which is obviously oil is one of the main things. Venezuela is one of the largest, oil they have
Producers,
the largest oil
right.
producers.
Oil reserves, one of the largest oil reserves in the world.
So we know that America is covered in blood and oil. We know that that's what America loves, and that's what they do. They go into countries, and they go into these countries with the idea of creating a dictatorship within that country, them being the dictators. So they create all of these illusions that the country is doing bad but they're the ones behind the poverty in the country. So what's going on in Venezuela, America has placed sanctions on Venezuela, which of course is crushing the economy and of course is affecting the people in a negative manner. So now that the people are now in this chaotic state, here comes America, whose hand is behind all of the chaos, and says, hey, there's chaos going on. Let us help you relieve you of this chaos. And it's all deception, because we always know that, they speak with a forked tongue.
Right. And the chaos is a deception, because in spite of it all, Venezuela is not a chaotic country. I'm getting reports from Venezuela. I have people on the ground in Venezuela now, and Venezuela is calm. What we're talking about is the illusion of chaos. But basically, it's an oil grab, and this illusion that the media tries to spin, that Venezuela was just like peaches and cream before Hugo Chavez. And as you saw, Hugo Chavez was elected in 1998. When he came in, half of the country was living below the poverty line. So we're actually talking about two separate groups. We're talking about the masses of people who were catching hell, who love Hugo Chavez, worship Hugo Chavez, and a group of people that controlled, who were connected to Shell Oil and the oil companies that control the resources of Venezuela, that was living fat on the land. And those people are the ones who are given the illusion that Venezuela is chaotic. But in spite of it all, Venezuela is gorgeous.
Right.
They're given the illusion, abetted by the media,
Correct.
This is a propaganda war.
Correct.
Right.
I mean, it's, in a very concrete sense, it's a war, as Iman has said, for oil. It's also a war to destroy the legitimacy of socialism, the concept of
Right.
socialism.
Right.
So this is a propaganda war that's being waged with the benefit of even the so-called liberal Western
Right.
press in terms of saying that Guaido is legitimate.
Right,
When there's
right.
Nobody even knew him a few months ago. 80% of the Venezuelan
Right.
population didn't know that he wasn't elected to anything. He
Right.
was the opposition
Right.
was fractured. The United States appointed him, said, this is going to be the face of the opposition.
Right.
And the only unity they have is that they're opposed to Maduro and the Maduro presidency.
Right.
So a lot of this projection of chaos in Venezuela happens because that's what the media portrays. And
Right.
like you said, I was talking to someone the other day. He said, I'm driving at night. Nothing's happening here.
Right.
Nothing's happening here.
Right.
But then you have Guaido, who came out of nowhere,
Right.
and next week he has an op-ed in the New York Times.
Correct.
With a picture of him in a
Correct.
church. Like,
Correct.
this is
Correct.
some kind of saint.
Correct.
So we can't look at, I mean, the point of that you made around, it's an illusion.
Right.
The media is very, very, very important in creating the illusion and in creating in the minds of people in the United States. Well, the United States is really doing something for good because the people are living miserably. And the point that Iman made, well, the misery was caused by the United States in the first place.
Correct. And is the media just lazy, or I mean, are they lying, or are they ignorant, or how can you be that ignorant? How can you not research when the information is so readily available? When you can take the actual times and places that things happen, and go through the entire history of Venezuela, how can the media be so disappointing?
I guess it depends on your expectation. I don't think the media, it's not laziness. It's a conscious decision of which side they're choosing sides. And you know, as somebody said, there's no difference between liberals and conservatives when it gets to certain points. In the United States, it's around race and money.
Right.
You know, we get thrown under the bus, but it's a conscious decision. You know, it's not as if the New York Times didn't know that Guaido, they didn't know him until a couple of weeks ago, or that the coordination between him declaring himself president and the United States affirming that within minutes certainly speaks to there's a conspiracy going on here. And so where's their analysis of you know, how did this happen and who benefits? And then the United States made it simple in the sense that Pompeo said, we want the oil. Usually they hide that till the end. You know, you know, with Iraq was weapons of mass destruction, and you know, Saddam Hussein was the dictator, and then we just sort of coincidentally benefit from the oil. But he said, we want the oil.
Right.
American companies can run this better than the Venezuelans, and although there are sanctions on companies doing business in Venezuela, it's not.
Bolton
The
said that
exceptions are
right.
the oil companies, the U.S. oil companies.
You know what was more fascinating than even that statement? And he boldly said, we want to take their oil. I mean, just like looked right into the camera and said it. But what was even bolder was, I forget who the white woman who was interviewing him, what her name is. Actually, I don't forget, I just never knew. But she referred to, because she made a statement about Russia, she referred to this being our hemisphere. Like we own half of the world. Hemisphere literally means half the world. You know, so I was like, wow, you know, that was deep.
But that's their mindset. That's the idea of that they can come in and control everything. That's what imperialism, you know, that we are in control. And then you have this false, you're speaking again with the forked tongue. You are actually implementing this idea of dictatorship, that you are supreme, and then saying, oh, democracy, democracy. But then coming into a country and saying this is now your leader.
Right.
That's not democracy
Right.
at all. And then
Right.
going back into what you were discussing about what's actually going on in the ground, since we're talking about imperialism and just the overall what's happening in the diaspora with Zimbabwe, like last year or the year before, I forgot which year it was. I went to Zimbabwe. We went to Zimbabwe on
2015, December 2015. 2017.
2017 of December, when we were in Zimbabwe, it was like, wow, just to see actually what was going on and how the country
Right.
actually looked and stuff like
Right.
that. And it didn't seem the way as if the media here, this Western media, which is controlled by the powers that be, is portraying it. And with Zimbabwe, what's important about Zimbabwe is that there are sanctions being placed on Zimbabwe, and we know it's only because they are the forerunners for land reform on the continent. What
Right.
they've done, no one has ever done that.
Right.
And when
Right.
you take a stand against these Western powers and these powers that be, they come in to try to destroy your country and to destroy the legitimacy of the leadership of those
Right.
countries that are opposing, Western imperialism.
Right. I don't even know if I could say that places like Zimbabwe and Venezuela are actually taking a stand against Western powers as much as they are trying to forge out a future for their people and
Right.
the people around
Yeah.
them.
But that's if you take a stand in defense of your country, if you exercise your right to self-determination,
Right.
their interpretation is, excuse me,
Right.
excuse me. There's this story, I don't know if it's true, where they said this U.S. general once said, he was talking about getting oil out of some African country, said, it's not my fault that God put their land on top of our oil.
Right.
And that's their attitude. So in this hemisphere, it's the Monroe Doctrine just going on steroids.
It really
That's how they
is.
went to this country from coast to coast.
It really is.
You know.
It really is. They believe in their heart of hearts that they own y'all.
No, true.
That God made them king, God made them emperor, and even the stand against socialism, the line that they take against people of color, indigenous people, black people, is decidedly harder than they take against white socialist countries. They can tolerate socialism in France a lot better than they can tolerate socialism in a country full of indigenous people that have a couple of resources. It's amazing. They are literally prepared to starve out millions of people in defiance of UN resolutions and mandates. They don't care. It's amazing.
Well, if you remember when Salvador Allende was elected president of Chile, democratic election, a socialist who was elected president of Chile, the United States waged a war against him in collaboration with the U.S. companies that were there. I'm trying to remember the mining company that was down there. But they waged that, and it was the same blueprint of, we will make the economy scream.
Right.
We will make conditions so bad for the masses of people that they will blame the government and rise up against it.
Right.
So then they greased the way for the eventual military coup by Pinochet. So this is not a new blueprint. But as you say, whenever black folks are involved or indigenous people are involved, the whole element of white supremacy enters it and makes it even more vicious and hard, because it's like you're just too uppity.
Right.
You don't have a right to decide what you want to do in your country or for your people.
Right. Beyond uppity, because uppity presumes that you're talking to other human beings. I think they feel betrayed by something they own. It's like they feel that you're my dog. You belong to me. How can you be doing these things when you should be like just at my feet? You're brought to heel. How can you dare even talk about self-sufficiency and asserting your humanity.
Right.
I mean, how is this possible?
Right.
Because they are still part of the United Nations. The interference in the affairs of a sovereign state is a violation of the Charter of the United Nations.
Yes.
That is correct.
December 12th Movement International Secretariat and the International Association Against Torture, which I'm the International Secretary General, are NGOs in consultative status with the United Nations. We sent a letter to the Secretary General that week that it happened saying, you got to take a stand because the United States is violating the Charter. And not only is it violating the Charter, the International Court of Justice, back in 1986, there was a case where the United States intervened in Nicaragua because they were trying to overthrow the Sandinistas, if you remember that.
Right.
And they violated their harbor. And the International Court of Justice made a finding that said that the principle of non-intervention involves the right of every sovereign state to conduct its affairs without outside interference, forbids all states or groups of states to intervene directly or indirectly in the internal or external affairs of other states.
Right.
And then there was a later case, I think in Uganda, and they referred to the International Court of Justice decision around Nicaragua, and it said, the court noted that Nicaragua had made it clear that the principle of non-intervention prohibits a state to intervene directly or indirectly, with or without armed force, in support of the internal opposition within the state.
Right.
That's what's happening in Venezuela. So that was our position around at least putting it on the international agenda, that there can't be a double standard.
Right.
You know, so if the United States is saying this is our hemisphere, then why is it when they do stuff in Europe on Russia's doorstep or on China's doorstep in the South Pacific that, I mean, how does that work? How is it good for one but not for the other?
Right.
And this has been illegal since Cuba. I mean, first of all, you are not permitted by international law to impose sanctions that restrict food and medicine.
Right.
But the whole game plan of sanctions is to keep people from being able to access food and medicine.
Right, so it's like a major contradiction because here comes America now saying, oh, we really care about the people of Venezuela. We care about the people all around the world. Although we're the ones that
so they can get some pieces.
Right, and it's like we care so much that we've placed these sanctions that are now destroying these people.
Right.
So do you care or do you want the resources? Like, which one is it?
Right.
And we place the sanctions to make the situation worse. Then say, well, you know what? It's a humanitarian crisis.
Right.
We're gonna have a humanitarian intervention.
Right.
We're gonna send food and medicine in there as a way to get in and infiltrate the country. And if Venezuela says, no, you can't do that.
Right.
You created then it's going to be another justification for you're undemocratic, you're killing your people, we want to intervene. In the same way, last week when it first happened, when France, the UK, said, well, you have to have a national election within 8 days, or we're going to recognize the opposition.
Right.
Said like, this is like unbelievable. If this were a TV show, people would say, "Come on, why don't you make something that's a little more credible, a little more believable?"
Correct.
You know?
Correct. One of the heartbreaks of the whole global well-being thing is the role of Barack Obama. You cannot negate the fact that the initial sanctions, listing Venezuela as an enemy, as a threat to national security, was Barack Obama. And basically, they did that because Chavez sided with Bolivia when the United States was trying to undermine the governments.
Evo Morales.
This whole thing started that Barack Obama is part and parcel to the conditions, the hurtful, deadly, impactful conditions of Venezuela, of Libya, of African countries and indigenous peoples across the globe. You can't get around that fact. I mean, it's easy to like hate Trump because he's so damn hateable. But you can't get past the fact that Barack Obama was a high-ranking general, emperor in the global hegemony that is the modus operandi of the United States of America.
And it exposes the question that you're dealing with a system and not individuals.
Dealing with the system.
Yes.
You're dealing with a system that there's a continuity.
Yeah.
Right.
In terms of the policy. The form it may take may differ,
Right.
but Bush engaged in the coup d'etat in 2002
Right.
and the different acts they took to try and overthrow President Chavez.
Right.
Obama with the sanctions, that this is a threat to our national security. Trump just bold
Right.
face.
He
We
did,
want the
right. He
oil.
gets in your
You know,
face.
we want the oil, but the
Right.
policy is the same, and I think it's very important in terms of your viewing audience to understand that, W.E.B. Du Bois said 60, 70 years ago, I believe that democracy has so far disappeared in the United States that there's no two evil parties. There's just one evil party with two
Right.
names, and they're going to elect who they want, whatever, no matter
Right,
what I do.
right, right.
And see, that's what we're confronted with this this smoke and mirrors of
Right.
Yes.
Republicans and Democrats.
Right,
Because on the
right.
question
And
of
who we like and who we don't.
right, on the
you
question of
know.
their foreign policy and domestic
Right,
policy,
right.
they line up on the same side in
Yes.
defense of capital, in defense of capital exported, in
Right.
defense of imperialism.
Right, right.
And that's why it's so important too for us as African people here in America to understand what's going on in Venezuela, what's going on in Zimbabwe, what's going on globally, and tying it back to here, because as Roger just said, it's a system that's set in place, and it's a global system, it's a domestic system, it's happening around the world, is happening here.
Right.
Because how can America sit and talk about any type of poverty, any type of anything, when millions of people are homeless in the streets
Right.
here? We witness ethnic cleansing of our communities. Our health care is horrible. Miseducation of our youth. We watch lynchings happen every day, all the time, of just like the police shooting us. You
Right.
know what I mean?
Right.
So it's all tied into the same system, which has
Right.
to fall.
Right.
That's the reality.
Right.
Right, and it's the
Right.
same system that when Katrina happened and black people were left to die, and the president said, well, they're refugees. Like,
Right,
all of a sudden,
right,
we had lost our supposed citizenship. It was Venezuela, it was Cuba who offered to help, offered to bring in doctors, offered to bring in supplies that for some reason the United States government couldn't get to people in New Orleans. And so they're the ones that are being portrayed as anti-democratic when it's the point Iman said
Right.
the real source of the problem lies here. And I think
Right.
that's what we want people to understand, that we've got to look right here to identify what's going on around the world. And from that lens, we make an analysis of what's going on and not rely on CBS or MSNBC,
Right.
certainly not Fox 5, to define the reality of what's happening and what's in our interest. We have to make our own analysis of what's in our interest.
Right.
Right. You bring up Katrina. Is interesting to note. It's important to note that the rebuilding of Katrina is still not complete. But when you look at the mudslides that hit Venezuela in 1999, and we're talking about like a year or so after Chavez was first elected, they rebuilt the community. The footage I showed was that community, those white houses with the face. I mean, they love Hugo Chavez. The people of Venezuela actually love Hugo Chavez. But he rebuilt that in a couple of years, and we're talking about hundreds of thousands of homes that were destroyed. Somewhere between tens of thousands and hundreds of thousands of people that died. We're talking about a situation where he came in Like I said, half the population was living below the poverty line. And the biggest threat is not that they can't count or they don't know how to handle that socialists don't know nothing about money. The biggest threat is that they were really going to be successful because oil is not their only resource.
Right.
They were going to be successful. He's from those people. He loves those people. Socialism has nothing to do with whether or not you can count money and make money. It has to do with how you split the money.
Is what you do with it.
Right,
and Chavez redirected the money from that small minority who are living fat off the land to how do we improve the quality of life of our people.
Right.
And that became the focus. And so that made him an
Public
outlaw,
enemy,
and a public enemy.
The bullseye,
and
the cat in the bullseye.
When we look at Zimbabwe, when ZANU-PF took power in 1980, one of the first things they did was education is a priority.
Right.
And that a large, I think maybe 80 or 90% of the population was illiterate.
Right.
And by 2000, I think they had the highest literacy rate on the continent of Africa because they made that decision. But once they did that, and they had received money from the IMF and the World Bank, in that period of time, the IMF and the World Bank said, no. You have to privatize different of your resources, or you're not going to get these loans. You have to redirect funds from education and health to these other areas because the IMF and World Bank were really acting as the bankers for Western capital.
Well, they are. The United States controls the World Bank. They have
They make the
control
because they contribute the most money for it.
Correct.
So it was at that point,
Correct.
And then it was compounded. I mean, unalterably compounded when Zimbabwe said, not only are we not going to deal with that, we're going to take our land back. We are going to take our land back from these white supremacist thieves who took it from us and distributed it to our people.
Which is according to international law. There is a right of return. It was established in 1948 that gives indigenous people the right to reclaim their land. Aside from the fact that they dealt in good faith with the no good bastards, in Great Britain. In 1948, there were laws that were put in place, resolutions that was voting on and put in place that gives people the right to return. They had that right according to international law.
But I remember some movie, something happens, the guy said, we didn't really mean it. We're just playing. It's not for black folks, not for indigenous people. So that's why when we look at what's happening in Venezuela, we understand the importance of it because if they were successful in Venezuela, Zimbabwe's is right there for them to move up because they want the land back. And the viewing audience may not remember that in August, right after they just had their elections, their free and fair elections, which I was at, which Viola Plummer and Colette Payne, we were there as observers. There were observers from the United States, the United States Congress, from Europe, from African countries. Universally, people recognize that the elections were free and fair.
I was the same in Venezuela.
At the same point, a couple of days, 2 days after the election, Trump signs an amendment to the Zimbabwe Democracy and Economic Recovery Act, which had been passed by the Congress, including the Congressional Black Caucus, that ramped up the penalties. It said, not only do you have to establish that you have democracy, but you also have to make provision to either return the land to the white folks or give them more than what they would do for that. So they're ramping up. They're never satisfied. They're like insatiable because the objective is to get the resources. The objective is not democracy. They could care about less about democracy. If that were the case, why do they support Saudi Arabia? Where has there ever been an election anywhere in the vicinity of Saudi Arabia?
There's an animal called the wolverine. They call him Gulo Gulo. He has a couple of names, the spiritual devil, the Indian devil. Basically, gulo gulo means glutton. He's called a glutton because his appetite is insatiable.
Yeah.
No matter how much he eats, he wants more
Yeah.
and more and more and more and more. So when I get the question, do you think I'm the devil? Well, I'm not going to go all metaphysical on you, but you certainly have some gulo gulo in you. If nothing else, you're the Indian devil because you are indeed the glutton.
Yeah.
There's a phrase in economics. It sounds like something I would make up, but it's not. White folks made it up. It's an economic phrase. It's called the Dutch disease. The Dutch disease, and coincidentally, the Dutch disease was a name that comes out of Venezuela and the Dutch Shell Oil Company. The Dutch disease is when a European power goes in to a country and colonizes the country and makes one resource the primary source of making money to the detriment of all other things. So that, because remember, Venezuela had oil, but Venezuela also has gold, and it's an agricultural society. So it has everything in place, just like Zimbabwe, to not just make a bunch of money, but eat and you add the education aspect to it, you're talking paradise again. The Dutch disease is the reason why people in Haiti were eating dirt, because the World Bank mandated that they had to get their food
imported.
They had to import their food, which is a time bomb ticking. The same thing with oil. You're talking about an agrarian society. Zimbabwe, an agrarian society.
Primarily agrarian. Correct.
Right. You add the educational component with the resources, and you're not just talking self-sufficiency, you're talking utopia.
Right.
That cannot be allowed.
And it can't be allowed because, like you said, they're so greedy because they realize they don't have anything to offer to bring to the table.
Right.
And they realize all the destruction that they have caused to all of us, throughout this whole period of time and stuff like that. So it's really something that's stemming from fear because they have to control everything. Yeah, because that justice must be served in a way. You can't be killing people, stealing and destroying things, and then thinking that, I could hold on to it. Yeah, the table is shaking now because enough is enough. You know what I mean?
Right.
And systematically, capitalism is a devil. It's insatiable.
Right.
It's the gula gula.
Yeah.
Because it's insatiable. There's never enough profit in this stage of capitalism.
Correct.
Profit isn't enough.
Correct.
It's got to be maximum profit. They will squeeze every penny out of something, even if it's not in their long-term interest, because that's the nature of the beast.
That's the glutton.
So that's it on the systemic level, and then on the subjective level, I'm sure that when Europeans got to Zimbabwe, different than even in West Africa, there's no real malaria problem. There's no mosquito. The temperature in the summers like in the 80s, and in the winters like in the 50s. They probably thought they had died and gone to heaven. They couldn't get any better. So they weren't going to. They were not going to give that up. Ian Smith, when he declared unilateral Declaration of Independence, said white people are going to rule for 1,000 years.
Right.
15 years later, he was not ruling.
Right.
But that's the factor, the behind the scenes factor, in terms of just why they don't want to give it up. But the real question is the resources. Yeah. Who's going to control the resources?
Who's going to control
and for
the
whose
resources?
benefit?
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
And human beings, specifically African human beings and indigenous people, are
communal.
They're a European resource. They are as much the resource as the oil in the ground and the gold in the ground.
Right. Because we're the labor that builds and develops for them. We do all of everything. So that's, again, like we are the source. We always have been. And it's just they want to control that. They have nothing to offer, and they will always want, they feel like they're the ruling class, right? So they want to continue to rule and reign and dominate and never give up any power.
And which explains the dilemma that we black folks are here in the United States, because we're in this hemisphere because we created profit for them. We were capital. I mean, we were commodities.
Yes, yeah.
Our labor, stolen labor. But capitalism at this stage in the United States, they don't need a lot of just regular common labor.
Correct.
And they don't have any use for us.
Correct.
And I'm sure if they wish they could, like if it were like in the Avengers Infinity War, they could just disintegrate us and have us disappear, but they can't do that.
Right.
So they have to find other ways to exploit our labor, which is why we're so much in jail, because in jails we create a profit.
Yep.
Slavery is legal under the 13th Amendment. And that
Correct.
we create a profit. We work jobs that if once people get released, they're not going to be able to get hired for. So that we're a profit-making vehicle within the prison system. And then we also provide jobs for a large swath of the white population in terms of, those institutions. So that's the problem we face. And that's why, and particularly want black folks to understand how this is all connected together. Venezuela, Zimbabwe, us right here, the fact that we're being ethnically cleansed out of our communities, out of Harlem, in Bed-Stuy, in Chicago, in Miami, in Oakland.
In the Bronx.
In the Bronx. It's happening all across the country, and all of this is connected to the mechanics of how capitalism works. So we have to understand this in order for us to be able to have an informed resistance, a resistance that we're going to win. Not just protesting, but protesting in a very tactical and strategic way.
Right. I've heard white announcers on television. They'll have a black guest on, an unabashedly black guest on, and they will make some sort of statement about black racism, and which is straying away from the issue.
Not only mention that you can't have racism without power. You can be prejudiced, but the difference between racism and color prejudice, I don't like you because you're light skinned,
but
I don't have any power to do anything with it.
That's the point. And when you make it a statement about an ambiguous subjective term like racism, you can get an argument. Or at least you can run off at the mouth. But in point of fact, there is no such thing as black supremacy. There is no equivalent to white supremacy. White supremacy is a global phenomenon. White supremacy is where people in India, Indians, the country of India, cannot get a job in Bollywood if their skin isn't white. They can barely get a job as a receptionist if their skin is not white. So one of the biggest things is all throughout Africa, it's all throughout India, is these bleaching creams that a lot of people are using to get white skin. There is no equivalent of white supremacy. Asians are not throwing away their children because they look too white. They get rid of their children because they're a little too dark. And I'm not talking dark like Beyonce. I'm talking dark like J-Lo. There is no equivalent to that anywhere. White supremacy is a global phenomenon that is a thing unto itself.
And all of the vehicles of the media propagandize that.
Correct.
And it's what gets put forward, there's always discussion in a lot of the videos that, there'll be a black guy and he'll have real light-skinned women or white women. Very rarely do you see that there's any black women that's being held up as a beauty standard. So it just reinforces that.
Right.
No, I was just going to say in terms of around the Venezuela piece, that we held a rally yesterday at the we called for a rally yesterday at the United Nations in front of the U.S. mission to the United Nations, as a matter of fact, around the U.S. hands-off Venezuela. And this young lady was the one, she was really the one holding the fort. She was on the bullhorn, she was doing the chants, she was, she just like really stood up and took the lead on that.
Right,
but the idea, and we asked other organizations to come and different folks came, but the point was we wanted the United States to know that we're here and we're not going for this, that we object to it, we protest it, we understand what's happening, and that we're going to stay in the streets because we understand that, a letter to the Secretary General is good, but you got to be in the streets to really make sure that things are happening. So following at that program, at the rally last night, there was an announcement that on February 23rd, there's going to be a worldwide motion to protest the U.S. intervention in Venezuela, because that will be a month from the day that Guaido came out and announced that he was the interim president. So we're asking everybody to do it. Somebody said even if it's just carry a placard or something so we want your listening audience to keep their ears open in terms of what's happening. They can find out from us. They can call our headquarters in Brooklyn. They can call 718-398-1766. That's 718-398-1766. Or they can go to our website, which is D12M. D, the number's 12M.com, www.d12m, to find out what's happening, because we need us to participate. We need to show that we understand, particularly black folks, we understand the importance of what's going on here. Right. That if they're successful in affecting the coup in Venezuela, we're going to see hell coming down on us, even more hell than we see now. And there was President Maduro did a video, a message to the U.S. citizens saying, we don't have a problem with you. It's the government, what the government's doing. Right. But the government needs to understand that this isn't a walkover. I was listening to the news this morning because they kind of thought that once Guaido announced it, he'd be able to take over. So now they're 2 weeks later, and that's not what's happening. And President Maduro is saying, you do remember Vietnam.
Right.
Like if you don't remember Vietnam, you should remember Vietnam. Right. Because if you come in here, this isn't going to be a walkover. Right. You're going to be involved in a long, protracted struggle that you were going to lose.
Right.
The people of Venezuela, still love
President Chavez.
Hugo Chavez.
Right.
I mean, he was their hero.
Yeah.
And Maduro comes from Chavez.
Yes.
That's right.
He carries
Chavista.
on. Right.
Yes.
There is no way that the people of Venezuela is going to accept this
Right, laying down. No, they're not.
And when you look, and the reason why the people of Venezuela loved Hugo Chavez is, like I said, he's from them. He cares about his people.
And he was black and indigenous.
Right. And he was effective in improving the lives of the masses of people.
That's right.
Yes.
The United States pull this stuff because one of the people who was there at the elections was Zelaya from Honduras.
Right. The one that they overthrew in 2009.
Right,
Manuel Zelaya.
Right.
That was them.
And just like Libya, Honduras,
Aristide in Haiti.
Right. But the quality of life for the masses of people in these countries are hell. Are hell. They have unleashed just the hounds of hell on these people. And that's the only thing that they can do in Venezuela is unleash the hounds of hell on the masses of people.
Right.
And indigenous African and indigenous socialism is not the same as Karl Marx, white folks, socialism. I mean, you look at everything. Gaddafi looked at both systems when he was carving out the system, the economic system in Libya. You look at everything. But there's a design to it, and the design is to improve the lives of your people. White folks is not into improving the lives of their people.
No.
I don't care what their plan is. It's just white folks stuff. They're not into that.
There are principles of socialism that Marx laid out, and then it always becomes its application to your conditions.
Correct.
You know,
To your
Fidel said,
conditions.
"We're in a tropical climate. We're
Right.
not, you know, we're not in
the ice box.
Russian ice box.
Right.
We're applying.
Right.
We're applying these principles to how do we move things forward in our society.
Right.
And I think that's why I said in the beginning, it's a two-pronged struggle. It's get the oil and discredit socialism.
Right.
You know, we cannot afford to have a situation where the quality of their lives are improved, and that's seen as an example of something that people around the world should strive for. That you can have you can have a very good quality of life under socialism. Means then why are we dealing with this? Why are we continue to do with capitalism?
Correct.
Which
Correct.
up until recently they always said,
Correct.
well, it's not capital, it's democracy. Like
Correct.
capitalism, democracy, interchangeable,
Correct.
as opposed to one is a political system, the other is an economic system.
Right.
And you can have democracy.
Right.
There's democracy under socialism. So don't confuse the terms and get people all caught up in their heads around what am I doing? You know, what am I fighting for?
Right. And ultimately, it's white supremacy. And white supremacy actually doesn't care about the system as long as I get all the money and have all the control all the time over everybody.
There was an article the other day around the 28 billionaires have the combined wealth of more than
Everybody else
3
in the damn
billion
world.
people.
Right.
Yeah.
28.
Right.
You know, that's the what they call the genius of capitalism.
Right.
That's the crime of capitalism. It makes no sense.
It doesn't.
That can exist,
Right.
and people are literally starving.
Right.
You know?
Right. Literally starving.
Right.
Literally starving.
And then it's disgusting how the propaganda machine, the Western propaganda machine, just pushes this idea that you want to strive to be like them. First of all, you're not. That's not a reality. And then you want to strive to be like them. It makes people lust after becoming these billionaires, and it's like that's an incorrect idea.
Correct.
That's not okay.
Correct.
It's not okay to have all of this wealth and flaunting it while people are starving, homeless on the street.
Correct.
That doesn't make any sense. It's inhumane and it's disgusting.
Correct. It goes against everything that you think of as humanity. I mean, it goes against the principles of family. It goes against the principles of community.
Right.
It goes against the principles of just caring.
Right.
What happens to the people in just in your circle.
Right.
You know, the concept of having all of it and controlling everybody I don't even understand.
It's contrary to human nature.
It really is.
Right.
It really is.
Whatever that means,
It really is.
They want to redefine the reality to make what they see as this is what everyone should aspire to,
Right.
and that's for us that's suicidal.
Right.
For us that's suicidal, and that's why Venezuela, Cuba, Nicaragua, Zimbabwe, black folks right here, that these are all connected.
Right.
You know, and that we have to understand that we have to be out on the street fighting that. They put you in a situation where you earn so little that you're just struggling to make ends meet. So that even federal workers, when they went into the shutdown, they were going to lose their houses. And this is supposed to be the iron pot that you're a federal worker. You never you're good for life. And most of them are us.
Right.
And so that there's no security.
Right.
Right. You can't go 2 weeks without, ended up on the soup line. You're convinced that you one of the good Negroes. You getting paid and you got and you mean to tell me that's your job? You can't survive for like more than 2 weeks.
Right. Or people who, I forget the percentage of people who said if you needed to get $400 in a day or two, could do it. Most of the population couldn't do it.
That's
$400.
Right. That's right.
You know.
Right.
So that's a reflection of just how everybody's just
Correct.
that far away from being in a homeless shelter.
Correct.
You know?
Right.
Correct.
And that's what we
Correct.
need to struggle about.
Correct.
That's why Venezuela is very important.
Correct.
It's crucially important. And that if they do intervene, we need people that when the call goes out
Right.
for people to get out in the streets,
Yes.
don't act like, well, that doesn't concern me. You got to understand that it concerns you very,
Right.
very immediately
Absolutely.
and very,
Right.
very closely.
Right. It concerns you so much that they are terrified, terrified
Yeah.
that a country like Zimbabwe or Venezuela or any Latin American, Central American, Caribbean country would be able to take their own resources. And I mean, they're terrified of this. They're so scared of you that you're on their mind 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. That they're always doing something to undermine you. I don't care where it is. Right here in America, they're always like figuring out a way to make sure that your education system is not quite functional. Your police force is antagonistic to its population. They are always doing something, making major moves 24/7, while everybody else is sleeping, to make sure that there is no surge in the life of African people right here in America. Forget about all over the globe, just anywhere.
Right.
They're terrified of this.
A lot of times people like to say, I'm not into politics and stuff like that, but politics are very much into you. Politics determine where you live. They determine what's going on, your education, what's going on in your community, and everything like that. So everyone should absolutely be into politics.
In politics in the broad sense, not simply do you go out and vote every year or every 2 years. But politics in the sense that what real democracy is your involvement in the issues that affect you all the time.
We got a minute. Give us all the information that we need.
For upcoming events, first mark February 23rd in your calendar, because that's going to be an international day of protests against the U.S. intervention in Venezuela, of people showing their support for Venezuela. The particulars of what will happen in New York, you can call the December 12th movement at 718-398-1766. That's 718-398-1766. Or you can go online to our website, which is D12M, www.d12m.com, to get information. But keep your ears open. Follow 30 frames a second. Read the Amsterdam News, the Daily Challenge, the different things, and listen to the very few radio shows that we have left. Because the propaganda is so important in terms of to listen to the news. You'd think the rest of the world was against Maduro. But it's only around 8 European countries, 5 very reactionary Central American countries, the Lima Group, which means that 170 countries in the world are supporting Maduro. So understand that we're in the majority.
We'll see you next week. Peace. We out of here.